Welcome to Thinking Green. I'm Rana, and this show is taped, so you can't call in, but hope you enjoy it. We get a couple more minutes this way as well, so that's good. This week we're continuing our series, end of year ideas for nonprofits in the New London area that are worth supporting in an effort to get people thinking about not just buying tangible gifts and stuff for the holidays, but spending money in ways that really help the community. So my guest today is Susan Tamulevich, who is the executive director of the New London Maritime Society, also known as, well, the Custom House Museum is your most visible property. And we're going to talk about, gosh, a lot of the facets of what you do. I know you used to have a weekly TV show, and we'll try to distill it into an hour. So welcome.
I'm really happy to be here. Thanks, Rana. Thanks for inviting me.
I guess maybe you can just start out briefly talking about like the history and and the mission of the Maritime Society.
Well, it's the 35th year. We're just ending the 35th year of the Custom House Maritime Museum, New London Maritime Society, and it started as a preservation effort. The Custom House building on Bank Street was a custom house from 1833 is when they started building it. And it was when New London was the second leading whaling port in the world.
Wow.
And they were very proud of that in town, and they wanted a fireproof building. So they got a very significant, turns out, architect, Robert Mills, who went on to design the Washington National Monument, you know, the white obelisk in DC,
yeah.
to design this building. And then he had to come up and show the builders how to build the Roman vaults and, you know, groin vaults and barrel vaults and all of that. So we have a fireproof building to those standards.
I'm guessing that after, like, New London was burned down 50 years prior, that it was an issue.
But the Custom House had burned 2 additional times after Benedict Arnold. So it was, and it's a lot of valuable records. So they thought, well, we don't want that to happen again. We'll get a fireproof building. They built this building, which is an important building, architecturally speaking and historically speaking. And in the 80s, like the government does, they say, well, who needs this building anymore? It's too big. New London was a bustling port, 1830s. Now everybody's going to New Haven. Why do we need a big custom house? Let's sell it. So they give it to the GSA, like they do with the lighthouses, and say, get rid of it, get as much money as you can. What happened, it was one of the very first of the preservation efforts in New London. Well, not the first, but an early one. And the citizens rallied, and they said, helped by the Day newspaper and Lucille Showalter, and they said, we want to preserve this building. And as I always say to the kids, so they were allowed to buy the building from the federal government, and what did it cost? And the fact is, it's just $1 because you are the federal government. You already own it, just like the lighthouses. You own it, you built it. Why would you have to pay a lot of money to take it on? So as preservationists, the museum was given to the group, New London Maritime Society, whatever, and they had to figure out what to do with it. And I think for a while they were going to be a branch of the Historical Society, but that didn't work out, and they decided to be their own thing. And so 35 years ago, the Custom House Maritime Museum was established.
Well, it is interesting in New London. We have so many different groups that are working on historic preservation, which is so important to our city. And I don't think they really like bump into each other much. I think each group has its own area of focus, and it works out not too badly.
It works out not too badly these days. I think there were some pretty bad days. And these days, we actually overlap quite a bit. like with New London Landmarks, working to preserve the buildings on Bank Street, who
Right.
are our neighbors.
Yeah.
And we do a lot of preservation. We actually don't own the Custom House. The city, everyone out there owns the Custom House, and we have a 75-year with an automatic 25-year renewal lease. Somebody was very smart to think of that.
So you're more like
Yeah.
property stewards than property
Property steward,
owners.
Yes, and with the lighthouses too, we actually do own the lighthouses, but then again, if we wanted to get rid of them, we couldn't just sell them, we'd give them back to the federal government. So we're stewards there, but we're much more owners than we are of the Custom House.
I'm guessing the federal government is not going to be asking for the lighthouses back again.
I don't know, they do like a lot of reports. So I feel obligated to fill out those reports every year about the conditions and what preservation we've done. But, so, the Custom House was established, and it didn't have a collection. There was the Tale of the Whale Museum, which was Dr. Weiss,
Oh, right, on Huntington Street.
on Huntington Street, and that collection was sold to Mystic Seaport because there wasn't an entity that would take it in New London. So, when the Custom House was formed, there was no collection to come in. Mystic Seaport has since loaned us several of the things from the Jibboom Club, but most of it they keep over there in their warehouses. But we are such a big repository of things from people, and almost every week people bring in the most fantastic things. And the museum, since I got there, so it's my 10th anniversary. It's the 35th
Wow.
anniversary. It's the 185th anniversary of the building. It's the 100 and something of, all the lighthouses have their anniversaries too, but there's a lot of things this year that all kind of line up. And what I've discovered is that the people in town are so interesting and have such great artifacts themselves and such great knowledge that a lot of what we do is very much presenting people, who've worked forever as a engineer, or who sailed around the world, or who built their own boats, and it's so much fun. And it's nice for people to be able to talk about what they've done.
Well, let's look a little bit at the building.
Okay.
This is, yes, 185 years
This year.
this year.
Yes.
And it is a beautiful building.
It's a really beautiful building, and in fact, these plans, I'll tell you a nice story, because the Custom House, despite maybe what you read in the paper sometimes, is the luckiest museum you're ever going to find. It is, every day we have some good luck fall our way. We had like 3 things today. But when the museum was going to be sold, when the building was going to be sold, the man who worked in my office, which is to say the maintenance person, the janitor, took home a folio that's about this size, well, about the size of a large binder, of the original drawings of that building by Robert Mills, of which in the country there are really very, very few. And this picture you're looking at right now is actually on the back cover of the large scholarly book about Robert Mills, because it's such a rare
Wow.
watercolor gouache picture. Well, we have all the originals because the man who was the janitor loved the building so much, it has no bad vibes or anything, that he wanted to wait and see what happened and who got the building and whether they deserved the. And so one day he just came by and he said, "You can have these," and he left it with whoever was the docent that day. And it's just phenomenal to have these drawings. It's a collection of about, 14.
Wow.
They have the cross section across the front, across the side, the back view, the side view, all the different views of the building. And there were 4 different custom houses in New England built with these same plans. The plans were not like blueprints, they were a suggestion. And of all of those, 3 of them remain: New London, Newburyport, and New Bedford. and each one was built slightly differently, but ours is the most intact as to how it was originally constructed.
Wow. And,
yeah, it's great.
And here is...
Yeah, they did cut corners a little bit when they were building with the pediment. You know, that triangular pediment isn't there. That was in the original drawing. But it allowed for them to put sort of a mansard roof and a flat top where the customs collector used to sit in something like a lifeguard's chair, and he'd look out with a telescope and try to catch people coming into the port or leaving without paying their customs duty. And in those days, up until the early 20th century, it was the customs money that ran the whole country and financed the expansion, the western expansion and purchase of all the territories. So
Oh, I hadn't thought about that, like the relevance of it to, like before there was an income tax,
Before
the
there was-
revenue
yeah.
came from tariffs.
And the customs agents oversaw the building of the lighthouses and the staffing and the supplying of everything to the lighthouses. And they also, after the Civil War, were the first Veterans Administration, paying the veterans. They did all kinds of things.
Wow, so now customs has a very different function now.
Well, customs, you see, now this is another funny thing about our museum, because we do have a display about customs, and actually the agents still rent an office from us. So we get rental income from U.S. Customs. But on September 11th,
Yeah.
they subsumed customs into
Homeland
Security. And the customs agency was a very proud agency because it was a real mark of standing to be made the collector. And they would give it to war heroes or prominent people in town. Sometimes the mayor would go on to be the customs collector. And so they had this very proud history. And like I said, they had all the money. They were the federal presence. They had the weights and measures. If there was a dispute in like Little New London where people didn't have scales and things. And when they were subsumed, Homeland Security, you can imagine how they are. It was like the 225th anniversary of Customs. The year before, it was the 225th anniversary of the Coast Guard, which was just a couple years ago. And the customs agents, the retired group of customs agents, said, we want to celebrate it. And Homeland Security said to them, what? You don't exist anymore. You're not having a 225th. So mean. So they did their own exhibit, and they opened it in San Francisco at the Maritime Museum. And the second year, 226th anniversary, we had it at the Custom House. And they gave us, among other things, because they like that we keep that heritage alive, I should have brought it. It's the Customs Declaration document from Apollo 11. When they came back from the moon, they had to declare that they were bringing something in, and it was moon rocks and moon dust.
Wow.
And it's signed by Neil Armstrong and all the guys on the crew, and it's the customs, and they gave it to us because nobody else cares about customs right now. So they have been kind of reduced in a way to Homeland Security and Border Patrol and all of that. But you know, one of the, in fact, I would say the major story at the museum is about the Amistad. That's such a wonderful, important story. But Customs was involved in that and bringing the ship in, and also selling the ship after the trial, right, the victorious trial.
Right.
And then today they do the same thing with enslaved people. They try to find people who are being smuggled in, human trafficking. And when we have kids come to the museum, we have so many school groups. That's one of the things we want to show them, is that customs is not what you hear about in the paper. There's a lot of human trafficking going on, people trying to smuggle in endangered species, invasive plants, all kinds of things that are, and one of the other displays they gave us was of the Beanie Babies, when trade first began again with China, which was probably when I was in high school or so. The Chinese just made things out of anything, and they infringed upon, things, Beanie Babies could be very collectible. So they made them and stuffed them with oily rags, and the kids would open the presents and get rashes, and they'd be extremely flammable. So Customs had to go out and try to track these down by the serial numbers and when they were being illegally imported. So Customs does a lot of good. They get a bum rap these days, though.
No, well, that's because of the face they have,
Yeah.
to the public and
Very
what their
bad.
mission is.
Yeah.
Well, let's look inside the building.
Yeah.
You were telling me before the show, this room was much different not that
Yeah.
long ago.
This room is on the lower level, which would be like the first basement. We have 2 basements. It's open to the ground in the back, but it's underground in the Egg Street side. And this room is where they used to keep all the contraband and the rum during Prohibition. And that window that you see, until this summer, was all bricked in. It's in the alley with the Waterhouse Salon, and through CDBG grants and some Palmer Foundation grants, we've replaced all of the windows on the lower level. I think it's 6 of them. They had termites, they sort of rotted out, and we had Deschênes and Cooper remake the historic windows, and this one they put frosted glass in so that you can't see in from the alley, and it's transformed that room. The room also, the lower level was never open to the public, but it's the only room, it's the only level that's handicapped accessible. So a wheelchair can go in, or you can walk in right off the alley or the back
The Water Street side.
The Water Street side, up a ramp. And we have taken our ship models, which were not in very good shape, and here's another way the Custom House is lucky. The region ship model group, club, has sort of adopted us, and once a year in April they have their meeting at the Custom House before they have their open house at Ocean Beach, at Port and Starboard. They have a big expo every year, and the meeting before that is at the Custom House. And what they started doing several years ago, like about 8 years ago, is taking home our models and one by one fixing them up and cleaning them. And there was one man who 6 years ago took home a rather large model that had been made by a cook aboard the Black Hawk, which was a schooner in the 1850s, 1860s. And it was all in pieces. There were no masts. The masts were just laying down. And this man put it together this large, this high, 6 years of work, hundreds and hundreds of hours. And he brought it to us the week before he moved to North Carolina, and was able to give a presentation at our Jibboom Club. That's what I was saying. We like to have people talk about what they do, and this man was able to talk about all the work he'd done on that ship over the 6 years.
And I want to recommend that people do go to your website, because there isn't really a calendar of events for next year up yet.
Not yet, yeah.
But if you look back at everything that happened over the last year, it's really a variety.
Yeah, we are, it's tough. You're talking about this time of year, what you can do, donating to organizations. It's very hard for all of us in this group. We are all unable to ask people for money. I mean, we were put to the limit this year because it was a really tough year. But we have tried so hard to diversify ways we can make money. So we have programs. We have the rental from the U.S. Customs Service, such as it is. We have rentals of the building. We have boat tours we've done. And everything we do, as soon as it's successful, 10 other groups in town start doing it. But nonetheless, we do many different things to keep ourselves afloat. And we have a great shop. And right now, because it's Christmas time, you might want to go out and see it.
So we can look at now.
Oh, this is the man who is talking at something called the Jibboom Club. And the Jibboom Club is for retired people. It's Tuesday afternoons once a month. And we have somebody come in and talk about their relationship with maritime matters. And I remember that huge cruise ship that came in years ago, the Empress of the Sea.
Oh, yeah.
The man who was the pilot for that, Joe Mako, is the sponsor of the Jibboom Club. I mean, these are people who've really worked on the sea. They're tugboat captains. Joe Mako, ship's pilot, but I mean, par excellence. He's like the super ship's pilot. He gave $1,000 last year, and he's doing it again, to fund this group so that we don't charge people. It's we have coffee and cookies and things, and then we have somebody local who really worked on the water or did something like this with the ship model, come in and talk about what it was like. And the people who come, some are more knowledgeable than others, but you get people who really know what they're talking about. And when we had the Van Zants who built their own sailboat and lived on it and sailed, around the world, we had we get the great sailors, depending on what our topic is and who our speakers are. And I've just been amazed at how that program has blossomed. And for museums, everybody talks about youth, right? And we do a lot of stuff for kids, but I love these people who have the history and the knowledge, and they have so much in them that they can talk about, and such curiosity and the time to share it. That it's a great thing, and it's a surprise to me that it.
And in New London, I guess, even though there are a lot of organizations that work on preservation, I think you're the only ones that really have that maritime focus.
Well, I mean, who does work on preservation?
Well, landmarks.
Well, they do preservation of buildings, and we actually have 4 buildings we preserve.
And your own, so there are, but none of them really talk about the ocean part of it very much at all.
Well, that's
and
our
link
that's
with
our differentiate. Yeah, that's what's a little different about us. And we, it's not that we wanted all those lighthouses, but somebody had to do it, and we've done it. And we honestly, I have to say, this year, after 4 years of lawsuits, and we did preserve in perpetuity the right for the public to visit New London Harbor Light. Now, how we get those tours set up, that's another matter. But we really went to the mat for that, to preserve people's pre-existing non-conforming zoning right to visit the lighthouse they built and they support and they own.
And what New Londoners might not know is there's a U.S. postage stamp that has
That's
a picture of that lighthouse.
They chose the most significant lighthouse in Connecticut when they did the lighthouses of New England. And the most significant is that one in the corner of that room, the tall white one that's on Pequot Avenue. It was established in 1761. And here's another wonderful gift that was given to us just about a year ago. A man in Ohio who actually was some kind of professor, he inherited things from his grandmother, and in her attic there was a newspaper extra announcing a lottery to raise the money for New London Harbor Light on the first page. It's just two pages,
Wow.
2 sides of the 2 pages. And that was the firelands. When people were burned out because of Benedict Arnold, they were offered land in Ohio to have a farm, and so it was called the Firelands. And somebody must have brought this paper with them, and there's no other copy of it that our librarians have been able to locate. And this man just thought he inherited it, he didn't want it, where would it be best? And it was here. And the reason they built that lighthouse, which is the oldest, the original one that was in 1761, oldest and the tallest on Long Island Sound, is that 30 years before, a very wealthy Spanish ship got, with gold and all kinds of treasure, got caught in storms coming up the coast of the United States. And they came into Long Island Sound, and they went aground on the reef right beyond Harbor Light. And so for 30 years, everybody was saying, we got to fix that. The reef is too dangerous. We got to fix it. And so that's where the first lighthouse was put. And it was part of not only protecting shipping, but defense, coastal defense. It was all part of the system of, like Fort Trumbull and Fort Griswold. It was all part of that system.
Yep, all the way, like from the Sound up the Thames River.
Yep, exactly.
Now, I don't know, this,
Oh, well, we love our library, and this is a page from the website. And our we people don't realize we have a beautiful library named for Frank McGuire, who was the lawyer when the museum was first incorporated 35 years ago. And we have incredible collections, and they're not just books and manuscripts and ship's logs, but photographs and matchbooks and scraps paper and all kinds of crazy things like the customs paper from Apollo 11.
and we have a photo here of the library.
Yeah, and in fact, we all had our holiday lunch yesterday. That's Brian Rogers and Lori DeRedita, our librarians, and Eugene McMullen, who's our paper conservator. And the library, I'll tell you, it's the thing I am the proudest of at the museum, because when I got there 10 years ago, it had been kind of forgotten. It was used as a closet. It was full of all this junk that was just in big black plastic bags. You know, you just have a room, you just throw
Yeah,
stuff
it's sort
in.
of like my house, all kinds of artifacts, but
Yeah.
who can find what you want when you want it?
But this was worse. It wasn't artifacts. It was just like old decorations and stuff. It was just like a closet. And gradually we coaxed Brian Rogers back, who was the original librarian, and he got the library back in order. They got it all cataloged and put online so that there's an online Connecticut database. So if you want to find a book, and we have some of the only copies of several books in the state, you know, important maritime books. You can look it up and find our whole catalog online. And there's a link on our website, so I'm glad you mentioned the website. But our librarians, they put everything together. They catalog it, because we have huge collections that I can't even get to of the bigger artifacts. But what they have done is take certain stories from our history and make online exhibits, and you can go through step by step and see, for instance, how the Fort Trumbull developed, or you know, the story of one mariner from Groton and how he went through various services and worked on the ferry, and you know, it's all so local and authentic, but rich and interesting.
And I went on the website this afternoon, and it was really interesting to me to see the online exhibits, especially, well, I didn't go through most of them, but the postcards I did.
Postcards are nice.
And it was interesting to me not just to see the picture of the postcard, but you could see what was written on the back of the postcard. I don't know if that was scanned for all of them, but for some of them at least. So it was sort of a snapshot into history, both the photograph of what was, 50, 70, 100 years ago in New London, plus like getting to know for a second the person who was in that place and time. So I look at a lot of websites in conjunction with doing the show, but also just doing general research. And this one has a lot of information on it. I would recommend that people who are interested in the sea and in preservation just kind of poke around it.
Yeah, don't be overwhelmed, because there's like different ways. In this country, most of the websites are really simple opening page, and ours is like 3 columns of what's going on, what's permanent and how to give money. And I model it more on the Guardian newspaper, where they have all that stuff on the front page. And I like to give as much information as possible, and that's what we're all about. And for instance, those postcards, you can download the high-resolution images yourself and have a copy of it. They're wonderful.
So now let's look a little bit one of the programs you have is that you interact with a lot of school children around
Yes,
the area. So
yeah.
tell me about those
Well,
programs.
Frank McGuire, we talked about him. It was our founding lawyer, and he died as a young man. And his sister is someone named Elizabeth Enders, who's been a big booster of the museum. And when she was a kid in New London Public Schools, she went on a bus trip that took her to the local historic sites. And for years, she tried to get some group to do that tour for other, for New London children. And it never worked out. And when we got the first lighthouse, Harbor Lighthouse, we started a program called Lighthouse Kids because we thought the lighthouse was so much bigger than us, a little society. It should be everybody's lighthouse, and everybody loved it. I don't know if you remember, we did the restoration, and the day after we announced it, the Carpenters Union called up and they donated the scaffolding, the carpenters to put up the scaffolding, the painters to paint it. We got the paint at 50%, and instead of spending 3 years to raise the money to then start the restoration, in 18 months the whole thing was done, right? It was just from announcing it to it being finished. Yeah, 18 months.
I do think that lighthouses kind of resonate with people. I'm just not sure why, but I think they do.
They do, and since you mentioned that, their symbol of the lighthouse is used by so many groups for showing the way or giving support or persevering in tough times, and that's what the lighthouse does. It helps you in your darkest hours, right? When you're out at sea. So yes, it does. It does resonate, and they are beautiful buildings, and they are constructed, like a machine with nothing extra, just to do the job that they were there to do. And our 3 lighthouses are all active aids to navigation. They're all very important.
And they're all quite different, one from the other.
Yeah, they're very different.
Now, talking about more school visits, when the students come, do they generally just come for a tour, or is there a specific program aimed towards them?
If we go to the last picture, this program is our, I guess you'd say, our signature program, because we do it in partnership with all the other nonprofits in town. We organize it, we raise all the money, but everybody else gives free admission to 300 students and provides their site educators. So everybody is contributing. So for instance, across the school year, instead of doing it as one big bus trip, across the school year, and it's 6 days at a time because we work with 2 classes a day, so that's 50 kids. We take 2 classes a day to visit historic sites. And so this fall, they went to see the Shaw Mansion and Hempstead houses. And we provide the overarching organization, and Jody Bartell, who did our Lighthouse Kids program when she was a teacher with New London Public Schools. She's our educator. She organizes it. She organizes the teachers, brings the kids there, does all the prep work with them. And then the sites, those 2 sites donated admission for the kids, 300 kids, and the educators for 2 classes a day for 6 days. So everybody works together. It's great. Right. So the next one we're going to do is they'll come to the Custom House and probably to Nathan Hale Schoolhouse. Then we always go to Fort Trumbull. I think this year we're going to try for the first time to do the Old Mill. And I think Lyman Allen will work with us for the first time. We haven't worked with them before. But we used to go to the lighthouse. We can't do that. When the Amistad's here, we go to the Amistad and bring the kids on the ship.
Now, do you know if the Amistad is scheduled to come this year?
Nobody knows. It's a big mystery. Everybody asks me. And in fact, the captain stopped in a couple weeks ago, and she doesn't know. So they are a new organization, right? We worked with them forever, but we worked with this new organization from their inception, but still, it's like we're big strangers to them.
Yeah.
And they applied for grants, and they got grants to work in New Haven and Bridgeport, but they didn't get a grant to work in New London or ask us about it. So, you know, you can feel badly
Yes.
about it, but whatever. You know, we'll get there.
Yeah, it might take time.
It'll take time. But we love the Amistad, and that is the great story we tell at the Custom House. So other groups, like this is the Solomon Schecter Academy. I love these kids. They're from about age 6 to 10 or 11 years old, and it's just a dozen kids. You know, that's the school, and they're very curious and smart. And they came in and did a tour just, I think, a week and a half ago, and that's what some groups do. The Williams School always comes in during, I think we have a picture of them during Black History Month, because they have a teacher who's very much, he sees the significance of the Amistad stories. So we have groups that come in just to visit the museum or to do a workshop, and we do programs about lighthouses, we do programs about the Amistad, we do programs about whaling, you know, just different topics, depending on what people want.
And then Williams School as
Williams
well,
Yeah.
except, well, maybe not.
Yeah, there they are. See, they're in the customs office, and the customs, like I said, the customs men to this day like us. So that's a case of all the contraband they've intercepted up at the airport.
Wow.
And that's like a caiman skin, and we have ivory, and we have that yellow document is the actual telegram announcing the Cuban embargo.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we have great documents and pictures from Prohibition days. It's, you know, you wouldn't know, because we don't like put them down in the front hall, but every place you go in that museum we have treasures. And we really are growing the collection like hand over fist. It's unbelievable.
So do the custom people still send you
Yeah.
things?
They do, all the time, all the time. And the most recent one was that Apollo 11, and I think they gave that to us 2 or 3 years ago.
Wow. It's just amazing for me to even think of what kinds of things they end up with, and
Yeah.
it never occurred to me what they would do with this stuff afterwards.
Yeah, all kinds of drug paraphernalia, as you might imagine, powdered tiger bones and all that stuff they use in Oriental medicine that's endangered species. You just should not have it. And we have the boxes, and we have the manuals from the 1930s about intercepting all the different types of drugs, and it's very interesting material we have.
Wow. Now, I'm not sure. Now, is this college students?
That's Connecticut College. Connecticut College did a
We're
special.
having some hookup problems.
Well, it's just that's Bill LaRue, who's our head docent, and he, if you ask him if you could see the Amistad story, he'll say, "Well, how much time do you have?" Because he likes to take his time. It takes an hour with him, but in the case of Connecticut College, this class, which actually had gone to Africa, they were really thrilled to have that kind of immersion, and so we teach to all levels, and we had a couple of classes in from Mitchell. You know, we worked with the colleges. We worked with Connecticut College on the time capsule project.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so it's all, it's fun. I mean, that's perhaps the most fun of all for me, is working with the kids of whatever age group, because they're curious and they have something they're trying to find out.
Let's see. Oh, this is the Jibboom Club. Now, you've talked a
Yeah.
little bit about the Jibboom Club, and
Yeah.
I've seen advertisements. What kind of programming do they have?
Well, Jibboom Club was formed in New London in the 1880s, I guess, of retired whaling captains and crew members. And, you know, once you'd been around the world, right, and spent, in overseas ports and spent all this time together as a crew. Came back to New London, it was pretty, it was not the same. So they like to get together and reminisce and sing those heave-ho songs. And, they actually had a lot of fun. They had a lot of things to talk about and artifacts. And they had a collection of artifacts, which is what became the Tale of the Whale Museum. He got that Jibboom collection. And they liked to talk about what they had done, and they would meet all over New London in one place or another. And they'd always have a parade, Jibboom parade, and they'd have a float that was like a whale boat, and as it was going down the street, all of a sudden a whale, a paper mache whale, would emerge from one of the side streets, and of course they'd go and kill it. And that was part of the pantomime they put on. And in the end years, they did that with a submarine, although they didn't kill the submarine, but they had a submarine come out from the side street. But in the 1950s, there were not that many members left, and they disbanded. They didn't want to pay their dues anymore, and that's when it ended. But about 10 years ago, when I got there, we decided to start it up again. And the idea was to have sort of a club where people played cribbage, which is a maritime game, and, just chatted. And that wasn't enough. It was kind of a slow simmer there. So we decided to have a speaker every month, and that has really taken off because there are so many local people who have either followings or friends or people who are interested in similar things who know of them. And once a month, it's the third Tuesday of the month in the good months, not in the winter, we have these gatherings, and they were meeting downstairs in that little room. They've outgrown it. Everybody loves that room. But they're up in the main room now. We can get 40 or 50 people to come. And that was Joe Mako, who's, like I said, he's the ship's pilot who brought in the Empress of the Sea. But talking about being a pilot on Long Island Sound, which is a very specialized,
Wow.
difficult job.
And
That's
some model in the back.
oh yeah, well that model is interesting. It was a man, Mr. Gums, who down in St. Martin's, he built that sailing ship on the beach in St. Martin's. Everybody from there knew the boat. They saw it built. They sailed on the boat. It got broken up in a storm, and then as these people moved to New London, right? Apparently, eventually, Captain Gums moved to New London, and he built this model, and then he died, and it was given to, one of the Dominican community, and he had it in his garage, and then there was an accident, and his son died in a crash, a motorcycle crash, and this man put all his energy into putting that model back together, and he wanted people to see it, people from the Dominican community to be able to see the Gull, and which is the name of the ship. And so we have it in the museum, and it's a beautiful model. It's a big model, and it's really a community piece. A lot of our models are not that specific to ships in New London, but that one really is.
Let's see what.
That was Kevin Blacker. This group of pictures talks about alternate revenue streams, and the last one was Kevin Blacker, who has these ideas about reviving some of the infrastructure along the Thames to do more shipping on the river.
Which you would think we're one of the very few deep water ports on the East Coast.
And there's a lot of infrastructure connections to the railroad, different kinds of assembly areas that could easily be brought back to life. And so Kevin rented the museum and invited, his 50 best friends to come and hear a talk about his scheme, and it's gotten a lot of traction. So people rent the museum for talks. This was a wedding actually a naval wedding 2 weekends ago, which was really exciting and beautiful. Yeah. And tomorrow, actually, Safe Futures is having their annual party. They're almost at 3 o'clock. They're going to be at the museum moving these tables up from the sub-basement, and they're going to be in the same room for dinner, a big dinner tomorrow.
So if people want to rent the space, they just get in touch with you?
Yeah, yeah. And for nonprofits, we're really affordable. You know, we try to be a community center as much as we can.
Now, there are some other slides here about tours, because we've mostly stayed in New London here, but...
Well, yeah, we own the lighthouses, and this is one of them, Ledge Lighthouse. And it's tough to, you know, we have the keys. Everybody can drive by them in their boat or whatever, a cruise, and we love, let's just say, we love Cross Sound Ferry. 200 people a day see these lighthouses. They love the lighthouses. But I will also add that kind of killed our tour business for little boat tours. But what have we got that nobody else has? It's like with the museum, everybody, or as you were saying, Rana, everybody has their thing. And we have the artifacts. We absolutely do. And with the lighthouses, we have the keys to the lighthouse. And we can bring people, we're doing it 6 people at a time, and this is a family. And in fact, the young woman there with the sleeveless top actually volunteered at the museum, and then she went on to do all kinds of maritime things all over the country. So she was coming back to visit. Her family came, and they booked a tour for just 6 people. We call them fun-sized tours to go into Ledge Lighthouse. But you have it to yourself. You go up, you go up on the lantern around the outside walkway. It's really fun and exciting. And it's not 50 people at a time. And you're in it.
And it isn't like just riding past.
No, which in itself is great. You know, there's a lot to see, but to go inside and get to go up in the lantern is different. Yeah.
Let's see, this is...
And then every year we try to do something different, you know, different trips, because like I said, everything we do, the next year 5 people are doing it. So this year we did a trip out to Great Gull Island, and there's a wonderful ornithologist there, Helen Hayes, her name is, who's in her, I think she's might be 80. She lives there all summer, and she works for the New York Museum of Natural History. And the big deal is to count the tern nests and eggs. And you have to put flowers and stuff on your hat, because as it is, the birds dive bomb you. And you make a, you know, we brought out I think maybe more than a dozen of us on this trip from the custom house, and you make a line and you walk along, and you do your 3 feet of ground, you know, a couple to either side, and you find the nests, and you put in a tongue depressor with a number of eggs.
Wow.
And it's how they monitor the tern population. And there comes a point where it's like, you know, that movie, The Birds. You can't stand it. There are like a couple of points where the birds are screaming in your face, and they just don't want you there, and it's almost terrifying, but you persevere, and at the end of the day, you've done this great thing. But they do that out at Great Gull, and those islands, I don't know, it's such a wonderful thing. All the islands off of New London, Plum Island, and we used to do a lot of trips to Plum Island, and they've been stopped since Trump's there. No more trips to Plum Island. But we did, I think, 8 one year. We were the biggest person bringing the group bringing. But Great Gull, this was our first year. We'll do it again next year.
Now this one, the Paranormal trip. Now that we're back at Ledge Light.
Well, you know, every year we try to do something new, and this is really pretty different. We had Cody, who's there, and his girlfriend came on one of our Ledge Light fun-sized trips, and they said, you know, we do paranormal tours. Would you ever like us to do a fundraiser for you? And I said, I can't believe it. Yes, of course. We would do anything, although I am the last person to be in the paranormal camp. I am in the pragmatic camp on the other side. But I am open-minded and fundraising.
It sounds like fun
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah. And then Tracy, who's there, Tracy Bassell, came on another tour, and she works with Cody, and she actually took over all of our lighthouse tours this summer. I mean, we have some really enthusiastic volunteers, and they're so good, and they're so interested. They did the normal tours. Tracy did the normal tours and organized them, but they also did a special tour where we got the Project Oceanology boat, which could take 40 people, and we just about filled it. And we went out, and this TAPS, the Atlantic Paranormal Society, TAPS they're called, had done investigations of Race Rock Lighthouse years ago. They used to have a show, Ghost Hunters or something.
Oh, yeah.
And they always showed Race Rock in the credits, right? Opening credits and final credits.
Okay, I'm going to go through the last slides really quickly because we have like 4 minutes.
Oh, sorry. And we did, on our Plum Island trip, our last one, Roger Riley took out his dowsing rods. I said, could you teach about that? And he did. This is the Woolies exhibit. I brought, this is the detail. Kids Ahoy, our kids exhibit. We have so many things at the museum, another revenue stream, a fantastic museum shop. These are items in the shop right now. Wind power, quilt, we're doing a raffle for a quilt of the Long Island Sound. This is our tote bag, that's our annual meeting. And that's our mascot. Loves oysters, loves the shoreline, slightly geeky and slightly endangered. And that's what we are at the Custom House, but we're holding our own.
You can take the computer. We can talk for a couple more minutes. But I, in fact, show what you brought.
Well, you can see this. This is a rare American woolly. We had, you talked about our website, a collector in Manhattan, the Bowtie Cinema Company. They live in Ridgefield, but they had a collection of these British, for the most part, late 19th century embroideries done by sailors. And they really have a lot of charm. This is an American one with the Boston Lighthouse right here, right there. And they gave us 32 woolies from one day to the next. They said, would you like these? We looked at your website. We think you seem like a wonderful organization that likes the community. And the Bowtie theaters believe in movie theaters to this day. They're still building movie theaters, like the Bowtie in New Haven, which is it has a bunch of them, but it has a nice bar and gathering space and a lot of movie history with it. And they believe in sharing things. And so they didn't just sell these, they decided they wanted them in a museum where people would see them. So we have that. I brought an item from our gift shop. This is a little seagull. Last week we had Smeagol the seagull. You were talking about the Green Party in Clinton and Madison. We had Mark Seth Lender, who wrote a book about Smeagol, which we have at our shop, who does the Living on Earth series on PBS. He does those. And I brought one more thing to show you about preservation. This is the interior gutter. Do you see that big hole?
Oh, yeah.
That was going through the attic of the Custom House up until this summer. It was encased in brick and mortar. And through the years, it had been pulled apart by ice, freezing and thawing, and all that water pouring into the museum. The museum building is beautiful, right? But instead of having the gutters go around the outside of the upper molding, it goes into the gutter, into this encased. But all that water was pouring in the four corners, and we've done 9 years of water penetration investigations, and now we're starting to remediate it in a big way. And we have these incredibly heavy copper,
also copper,
solid, but no seams. that are replacing the interior gutters, and all 4 of them have been done, and we think we've stopped the water, and now we just have to replace the roof. That's
So in the
next thing.
last minute, let people know what hours you're open if they just want to stop by.
Well, before Christmas, we're open Thursday, Fridays, and sometimes Saturday nights till 7. So you can come into the museum shop, but the museum itself is open from 1 to 5, Wednesday through Sunday. So it's 5 days a week. We've always been open since I've been there on weekends, because we think as a community museum it's important to be there, so that if you have somebody come and visit and you want to show them something about your town, they can go to a museum that just talks about the stories of the waterfront.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you.
Susan.
I'm really happy to be here, Rana. Thanks.
We tried to get as much in as we could.
You got a lot in.
I recommend to people to go on the website and go visit the Custom House, especially at this time of year. So
Thank you so much.
I enjoyed it, and
Nice to see you.
we'll see you at the Custom House and other sites in New London.
Happy holidays.
You too.
Bye.